Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you here this morning. Hal Ferguson is here representing the United States Agency for International Development. USAID is perhaps less understood and appreciated than one might expect. USAID and the people who work for it represent the best of America. The desire and the determination to share American resources and expertise with countries seeking to become self-reliant and leaders of their own development, that is USAID's mission. USAID focuses, among other things, on inclusive economic growth, education, and health care. The agency was founded in the Kennedy administration, bringing together several pre-existing assistance programs that had begun in the immediate post-World War II era. Mr. Ferguson is USAID's acting assistant administrator for the Middle East, overseeing AID's efforts in 10 countries. The American University in Cairo, which I represent here in Washington, is honored to be one of USAID's partners in Egypt. Prior to USAID, Mr. Ferguson was with the International Republican Institute, IRI, for 13 years. He helped Afghanistan prepare for parliamentary elections and for its first presidential election. He was also in Iraq as IRI's Director of Operations for its program there. Please join me in welcoming Hal Ferguson.
Mark. The chairperson didn't use Worcester to have this role. She's too modest to say that the link is that she's the director of the Washington office of the American University in Cairo. This is America's largest university abroad anywhere in the world, and it's second in longevity to American University in Beirut.
Thank you, sir. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you, Cynthia, for the kind introduction. As you know, USAID is very proud of our long history of partnership with the American University in Cairo. And thank you, Dr. Anthony, for the invitation to speak at the U.S. Arab Relations, National Council on U.S. Arab Relations. I want to extend a special welcome to the students, fellows, and young professionals in the audience. If you're thinking of working in foreign affairs, I've now worked at USAID, and as you just heard from Cynthia, I also worked at the USAID Implementer, and it's an incredibly rewarding career. I'm not here as a recruiter, though. I'm here to talk about what we do at USAID and our vision for helping communities along their journey to self-reliance. USAID has a long history of assistance in the Middle East. In Egypt, for example, we have provided nearly $30 billion since 1978 for programs in education, health, economic development, and governance. These programs were designed in coordination with and in support of Egyptians to ensure that future generations will have the tools to succeed. USAID's programs have directly supported everything from the elimination of polio to building modern sewer systems in Cairo and Alexandria. The needs in the region have been great over the decades, and our response has been huge. It continues to be huge. The United States has consistently been the largest contributor in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. We have contributed $1.2 billion in humanitarian aid for Yemen since just fiscal year 2017. And since the start of the Syrian crisis, the United States has provided more than $9 billion in humanitarian assistance, both in Syria and in neighboring countries, where Syrian refugees find temporary homes. Now, those are big numbers, but we believe the purpose of our work is not to feed conflicts with humanitarian assistance in perpetuity or to create dependence. We believe that the purpose of foreign assistance is to end the need for foreign assistance. Before I go on, I want to share just one story that illustrates what those big dollar figures mean to the people on the ground. Our mission in Beirut just released a beautiful video from northern Lebanon with no script, just the words of one of the people we help, a farmer named Heikel. The video begins with Heikel in his home talking about the loss of a loved one. He says, quote, "I raised her on my own and watched her grow, and in a blink of an eye I lost her. She died of thirst," he says. Now, it's not until the video moves outside, with Heikel walking through his apple orchard, that you realize he's talking about one of his trees. But this is his livelihood, and he had been losing his trees for lack of water until a local agriculture cooperative received a small USAID grant to support an irrigation project in his community. That grant helps the cooperative and local municipality install a pump and distribution pipe from a nearby artificial lake. The farmers installed their own branch pipes and modern drip systems. Now that the system is in place, 77 farmers, just like Heikel, have reliable irrigation, and their cooperative will maintain that system into the future. The American people contributed just $149,000 to Heikel and his cooperative as part of a much bigger project that will help as many as 600,000 Lebanese. But it's Heikel and his neighbors who are the ones who are changing Lebanon by using our assistance to strengthen their own country and their own economy. My boss, USAID Administrator Mark Green, reminded us recently that development needs to be dialogue. It's not a monologue in which USAID shows up already with all the answers. His remarks were in the context of some of our expanded work in northern Iraq, where we're trying to listen more to local communities there as we try to improve our response to the genocide and displacement caused by ISIS. We're working with ethnic and religious minorities, or what Iraqis call component communities, not only because pluralism is important to Americans, but because Iraqis themselves tell us that these communities are essential components of Iraqi society. If ISIS extremists are allowed to destroy these fragile communities, the larger mosaic of Iraqi society will be weaker. Now, this is only part of what we're doing in Iraq. We're working to improve the country's election system and governance. We're investing in its economy, and we're helping alleviate the Basra water crisis. But rehabilitating these towns and villages in northern Iraq, purged of their original inhabitants by ISIS, gets at what is truly great about USAID's work, and also what is very challenging and very difficult. You may have heard that the Trump administration is taking a close look at how and where we deploy foreign assistance as part of our overall foreign policy. We are reviewing how we spend U.S. taxpayer money and strive to better show the impact we're having. We don't want aid to prop up broken systems or frozen conflicts. We want to be sure that our assistance is really helping people and is part of a move towards peace, prosperity, and stability. In Syria, we found with our assistance review that other partners in the region were willing and able to step up and fund a larger share of the needs there. We're still working in Raqqa and surrounding areas, and we're providing humanitarian aid throughout Syria. And now, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other members of the Defeat ISIS coalition are taking a bigger part in paying for stabilization programs in northeast Syria, to the tune of about $150 million in recent contributions. In Yemen, the need is great, and the large U.S. contribution I cited earlier is not going to meet that need by itself. And there, too, our international partners are also stepping up. But nothing will be enough if the conflict continues to feed the humanitarian disaster. As in Syria, Yemen needs to find a political solution. Only once that is in place, Yemen and its partners, including the United States, can move on with the real work of development and restart the country on its road to self-reliance. What do we want to get from foreign assistance in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, elsewhere? Well, first, we haven't forgotten that our humanitarian assistance is an example of American values, including our generosity. We're proud of our brand and happy that it's clear, USAID from the American people. But our assistance is much more than an expression of our generosity or charity. It's an important part of our American foreign policy and crucial to our security. We're willing to invest in other countries and their journeys to self-reliance as part of our mission to bring about a free, peaceful, and prosperous world. Strong, stable countries make good partners and enhance American security. Prosperous countries that listen to and meet the needs of their own citizens are a bulwark against extremism. There's a misconception sometimes about how we go about foreign assistance. Some of you might think that most of the money goes directly to foreign governments, and they get to decide how to spend it. But most of our help goes to projects that directly benefit people like Heikel And every activity needs to have a plan for sustainability. We want to know that the local communities will take over the projects and continue to work long after American money stops flowing. That's the reason that USAID funds so many scholarships and provides other support for institutions like the American University in Cairo, the American University of Beirut, and the Lebanese American University. We believe that the graduates of those and other fine schools will change their countries by working with their local communities, and we're proud to support them. For those of you who attended this conference last year, at that time, USAID told you the story of 3 girls who attended a pilot program supporting science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, schools in Egypt. The girls went on to win global Intel science fairs. More importantly, from USAID's perspective, the government of Egypt is now supporting the STEM program and scaling it up nationwide without our assistance at all. I asked our Cairo mission for an update before today, and I'm happy to report that all 3 girls are continuing their STEM studies in universities in Egypt and the US, and 2 received full scholarships. It's girls like this that represent Egypt's future. You may have seen pictures of Melania Trump recently visiting Giza and the Sphinx on her recent trip. The woman next to her in most of those photos was USAID Mission Director Sherry Carlin. And you may not have heard it from the news coverage, but this was not just a nice photo op. USAID has invested about $100 million over the years in antiquities and tourism programs in Egypt, including a project to lower the groundwater around the Sphinx to help preserve that ancient monument. Our long-term engagement in the Middle East and North Africa is not going away anytime soon. But unlike the Sphinx, foreign assistance is not forever. We're serious about transitioning our relationships with countries from donor and beneficiary to real partnership. If a country demonstrates that it's committed to its journey to self-reliance, USAID wants to assist them along that path. We prioritize programs that incentivize reform, strengthen in-country capacity and commitment, attract private enterprise-driven initiatives, and help our partners mobilize their own resources. How do we do that? Well, as I said before, we start by listening to the communities themselves who we want to help. I'll tell you what that looks like in one USAID program in some of the most disadvantaged communities in Tunisia, where unemployment is high and youth unemployment is even higher. Rather than move into these communities with a big infrastructure project or a Make Works program, a monologue with USAID having all the answers, we asked the young people themselves to do a needs mapping project for their own communities. We wanted them to tell us what they needed. And with that input, USAID supported a number of small, simple, practical projects. We supported the rehabilitation of a community park in Sidi Bouzid, the creation of 2 local youth radio stations in Deir Hashur and Kef, and 4 community cleanup campaigns. We heard about the impact of these projects on the young people themselves, and we heard about how it changed the life of Firas, a young woman who trained as a boxer at a USAID-supported youth sports complex and went on to win gold medals at regional and national competitions. Firas in Tunisia and the Egyptian STEM students, and Heikel the farmer, they're the future of their countries. The journey to self-reliance is a long one, and it's a hard one of progress and setback. And it may be driven, but it must be driven by the people in the region. It is not something that's going to happen tomorrow or next year, and it's not something that we as Americans can make happen all on our own with the help of Tunisians, Egyptians, Iraqis, and all the many peoples of the Middle East. But together, we improve lives, we promote peace, and we work towards a better future. Thank you all for your time.
We have 3 minutes for questions.
We have about 3 minutes for questions, if you wouldn't mind taking a 1 or 2.
The town hall I have to get to.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, okay, great. So we have like 2.5 minutes. So,
2.5.
There are several questions dealing with unemployment, education, training, and water, and women. So because you mentioned women and girls several times in your talk, the question is, what are the challenges and opportunities for USAID in the Middle East in terms of furthering women's participation and women's rights?
No, thanks for raising that, Cynthia. It's a matter that's very important to USAID, very important to our administrator, obviously very important to the people of the region. I think a lot of progress has been made in recent years with women's rights in the region. Tunisia, I think, deserves a lot of credit for passing some of the most progressive legislation around women's rights in recent memory, and it's not just in Tunisia where this progress is happening. A lot of the work that Usaid does with women's groups around the region is around this very thing, helping women advocate for themselves, their own interests, as part of civil society, but also mainstreaming their efforts throughout the rest of our work, including economic development or healthcare, etc. Women, of course, as many of you know, face unique healthcare challenges in the region, especially in conflict zones, where they are particularly exposed to broken healthcare systems in a place like Yemen or Syria. And much of our humanitarian assistance in those places attempts to meet those particular needs of women either before or after pregnancy or other unique health concerns. So in summary, I think women in the region have, I think, made some significant advances in recent years. And we attempt to work with them across everything we do, not just through the narrow lens of advocacy for their specific rights, but to make sure that they are plugged into everything we do, economic development, etc., whether it's a conflict zone or not.
Great.
Thank you very much, sir. You covered a lot of ground.